don't have to read and write sheet music to be great. And here are just a few examples of some people you might know who didn't allow it to get in their way either. I want to discuss some reasons why you may eventually want to learn how to read and write sheet music, but also some reasons why you just don't really need to. Kind of, not really, but kind of. Now, when we're talking about sheet music, it's very important to make the distinction between sheet music and music theory. Now, the caveat here is that you don't need either in order to be a great musician and to learn and make a ton of progress in your musical journey. However, if you had to pick and choose one or the other, I would go as far as to say that understanding some basic concepts in theory is probably more helpful. Now, there's a very important question as to whether or not you can really understand concepts in music theory without also understanding things like notes and chords and all of the things that are generally involved in reading sheet music. But it's also important to make the distinction between reading sheet music like piano sheet music that looks like this versus some more basic chord charts and lead sheets and things like that. There are levels to this. It's not just as simple as you either know this or you don't. If you sat me down in front of a Ravel piece and asked me to sight read it, not my strong suit, but you can put pretty much any chart in front of my face and I'll be able to play it. So as with everything in life, this is of course a sliding scale. And I think sometimes it's easy for young musicians to get caught up on this idea that if I can't sight read every exercise in the book perfectly on the first try, that I'm not doing something. There's too much of a focus based on that. Now, why do we do those exercises? Well, they're helpful because they're gonna make you better, and that's just the fact of the matter. So those exercises are always good to do, but it's important to remember they are not the determining factor as to whether or not you are able to read sheet music. That's just a different level of reading sheet music. So although there are plenty of ways to look at reading and writing sheet music and understanding what it is, the important takeaway is that you don't need any of it. Because whether you're looking at it as sheet music or the different components of music theory, there are plenty of examples of incredible musicians throughout the years who didn't know either. How is it that they are able to function and be as good as they are without knowing any of that stuff? Well, let's take a look at some of that. Now, obviously, if you're not going to be playing based on theory or based on reading, what's left? How else are we able to figure out what we're even supposed to do? About the only thing left at our disposal is our ears. Well, good news is they happen to be the hands down most important thing that you possibly can use when it comes to playing and learning music. This is why this works. Think about it. Reading sheet music and understanding music theory, none of those work at all unless you're connecting it to your ear and using your ear to apply all of the things that you might read or all of the things that you might know from a theory perspective. In jazz, we always like to talk about Chet Baker as an example of this. Now, people say that Chet had some understanding of some music theory concepts, but in terms of reading, he really didn't read music at all. And he didn't have a ton of theory either. But it was his immersion into the world of the music that he was trying to play and his exposure to it over a long period of time that trained his ear to understand what he wanted to sound like. And at that point, all he had to do was make his instrument follow suit. Bro, I'm filming a video right now. It's about like people who don't really read or use music theory. And
hey, that's me!
How important is theory for you guys to make the stuff that you make?
We don't use theory at all. I mean, not conventionally, at least.
There you go. Now, what it winds up being is that you are using theory in some ways. It's just not important that you came from the perspective of like learning it first in order to apply it.
The way I look at it is theory is like a language, right? Everyone has decided to speak the same language or a similar language when it comes to music theory. So as to communicate and understand it, and through that language you can learn more, you can communicate very quickly, right? I speak a language that no one understands. So it's very useless. I have my way around it, and it allows me to communicate through instruments and to find a means to an end. It's not nearly as developed as like the language that everyone else speaks, and it's certainly completely useless for communicating a musical idea to someone else. But I find that other people who have developed their own musical language can use that as a way, so using their ear as their shortcut, and that's what we do in the band. Mark has a very strong ear, and he'll learn a lot of my stuff by ear.
It's so funny that you said the ear thing, because I started talking about ears, and I was like, oh, I should call you, and that's literally just what you said.
So I'll give you an example. Nolly, who used to be our bassist and used to write with us, he knew theory incredibly well, but he also he still to this day has an incredible ear. So he'll sooner learn things by ear, and he'll look at theory as a way to sort of understand something or relay something, and he speaks that language, right? But when it would come to writing or anything like that, it was always instinct. It was always based off of what sounded good. He would never be one of those guys who would like break out the theory to like put a riff together, you know?
Well, yes, 100%. But also, I think that even further illustrates my point of like, even if you do know theory, music isn't based on theory, right? Music is based on feeling, and it's based on ideas that come more from a visceral place rather than like this technical place. And when we do hear music that comes from a technical place, it's oftentimes like boring and not that fun to listen to.
Right. I always think of theory as retrospective, and that's and it can occasionally be a good way to problem solve if you use it like the lessons you learn. For example, your Imagine video, you were showing me a cool trick. I think you're saying you take, what is it, the fifth or something?
Yeah.
I don't even remember what you said, but I remember how it sounded. So I've used that trick since then. I don't even remember what it's called. I don't know it in the language you speak, but I know it in music. I know how to do that in music. So using theory, you relayed something to me which now I understand in my own language. I don't remember it was the fifth or fourth or whatever it was that you said.
So here's an example of the thing that Misha's talking about. You might remember a while back on this channel, we posted a really, really stupid video accompanying that video where all of the celebrities got together to create what was a really awful rendition of Imagine. So I took that and I fixed it. And so what Misha's talking about here is the device that I actually used in order to do that. And here's basically the trick. You can go to absolutely any key center you want at any time, and your ears will make sense of it if you throw a 5 in front of it. Say we're gonna play something generally in the realm of like E flat. Right there, at the end. So throughout playing all those chord changes, I'm establishing the key center that feels like home base. Now say I throw in a chord that completely does not match that key center in any way, shape, or form, like this. Check this out. Now that kind of sounds cool, but it certainly doesn't sound like home base. If I wanted to resolve to a completely different place than what I've implied the entire duration of what I've been playing, I can use that fifth chord setup to get me really anywhere I want to go. It might still feel a little bit unconventional, but it's not so jarring that you're like, why did we go there? And this works even better if you use a 2-5-1 setup instead of just a 5. So in the Imagine video, we kind of overused that device to basically bounce everywhere. And well, that sounded a little bit like this.
It's easy if you try.
Know how alone
Sometimes if I'm trying to write something jazzy, for example, something that I call jazzy, I have a few little moves that I'll do and a few rules that I follow. You know, I'm like, oh, you could do a funky note on these in-betweens as long as you land like on a downbeat or on like a strong accent.
Sure.
With something that fits. And in my mind, there are notes that are in, there are notes that are out, and there are notes that are out, but in a really cool way.
Yes.
And I've gotten a lot of shit for not knowing theory from people.
They're wrong.
Well, I mean, as a general rule of thumb, I think more knowledge is generally better than less knowledge.
But anybody giving you shit for not knowing theory, that's wrong, because the end product is the thing that matters, and how you get there does not. And that's kind of the whole thesis here, is like, is it helpful sometimes? Yeah. Is there anything bad that's going to come from learning theory? No. All you guys have to do is go listen to Periphery and tell me if Misha is wrong for not knowing theory or not approaching music from a theoretical perspective. That would be insane to say. And I'm not kidding when I talk about how jam-packed Periphery is with really incredible theory devices. In fact, we did a video on this channel breaking down one of Periphery's songs and discussing how they create absolutely incredible composition within their music. Take a look at this figure, for example, from their song Satellites. This particular rhythmic device uses 15 16th notes. And because of that, every time it starts over, it's starting from a different part of the measure. And here's actually a little write-out that I did of showing you exactly what's happening there and counting through it so you can kind of keep track of where one is.
Seen some people sort of think that like I'm anti-theory or that I'm against or I'm encouraging people not to learn it. So I just want to be clear, like I think more knowledge is always better. So yeah, if you're interested, definitely learn it. I think my struggle has been that because I already know this one language, I find it very difficult to shift to another language in a practical way, because that's my understanding of theory, and I'm just so much more comfortable with that language. And that language is, there's no steps between that language and writing. Whereas like if I were to use theory to write or think about it as I'm writing, it's just extra step. So I found it very hard for it to stick. But I'm not anti-theory at all, and I would encourage everybody to learn theory.
The important point that you made just now is in regards to viewing theory as a language, and the fact that you have sort of your own language, whether your language is theory or your language is playing by ear, like however you come across that, it is a language that we need to learn much the same way as any other language, which is immersion and exposure. That's the most important part.
Another good example of this, I don't know if you're familiar with the Final Fantasy series, but one of my favorite composers ever, Nobuo Uematsu, who, I mean, just compositional genius, one of my biggest influences of all time. He also doesn't know theory, and he's composed for decades and decades, thousands of pieces, a lot of which are still to this day played by orchestra.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
For a guy who doesn't know music theory to go that far, that was another sort of beacon of hope.
So as you can see, there are so many reasons why reading sheet music and understanding music theory, can it be helpful? Yes. Can it be useful? Yes. But it should not get in your way. It should not stop you from using your ear to play the music you want to play. Because at the end of the day, like Misha started to kind of talk about, he has his own language to address many of these topics that he just developed over the years of writing music and playing music and understanding what he wants to hear because he's familiar with the language. Now, before we totally write off reading sheet music and understanding theory, let's talk about some reasons why it might be really helpful. Everyone has different musical goals in life. Maybe playing jazz, right? Is reading music going to be helpful there? Of course it is, right? If you understand how to read chord charts, understand how to read maybe single line melodies, that's going to be very helpful for you because you'll be able to sit down with any band and basically play anything pretty much right off the bat. But is it as important to be able to read like Ravel level sheet music on the piano? Like, no, it's not as important that you need to be really good at that. Now, if you want to be a concert pianist playing with an orchestra who is performing Ravel, yes, this is obviously going to become much more important for you. It's just a skill that you learn depending on what type of music and what type of playing environment you're going to find yourself in. And aside from the sheet music aspect of it, from the music theory side of things, it's just incredibly helpful to understand all this stuff, because once you are able to put a name to these devices that you might hear, it allows you to grab a hold of these devices and use them more intentionally when they're called for. So if you want to get into learning some sheet music and starting out with some basic music theory, then you might consider checking out our Intro to Piano course over on the Cornell Music Academy. This is something you can do at your own pace in the comfort of your own home. It's a step-by-step guide with tons of actionable steps and examples. We're going to talk about reading sheet music, but we're going to do it in a way that's super clear and easy to understand. We're going to talk about some basic music theory concepts, and everything is incredibly clearly laid out, very clearly explained, and we also have tons of fantastic visuals. And right now, now, you can get 20% off the course by using code Academy20 at checkout over on introtopiano.com. And if you're already a musician or you're already playing piano or any other instrument and you want to improve your improvisational skills, we have a course all about improvisation. And even if you're more advanced than that, we have a course all about modes and how to use them, how to actually use them in your playing. All that is down in the description below. Is the best way to support the channel. Thank you so much for checking that out. I really appreciate it. My main goal with this channel has always been to encourage you guys to explore your musical creativity and to feel like this stuff isn't out of your league. You are more than capable of learning all this stuff, and even if it seems daunting at first with reading music and music theory, it's important to remember that you don't need that to start. Just play. Use your ear. Listen to the things that you love, that you want to sound like, and just start trying to emulate that. It's how we learn to speak when we're kids. It's how we basically do everything that we need to learn with any fluency. So in closing, yeah, I guess this video isn't necessarily meant to tell you you should not learn how to read sheet music. It's simply meant to tell you don't let it get in your way and don't let it stop you from starting now. That's going to be all for today. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time, and we will see you in the next video.